GoForThe2.com in with the week one predictions for 2021. We made it. Another college football season underway. We got it started last Saturday with week 0, 5 games on tap. Disappointing campaign for Scott Frost and the crew. They drop another week 1 matchup, 12-21 overall. Pitiful performance by Scott Frost and the Nebraska Cornhuskers. Drop that ball game 30-22. We're going to get into the predictions for Thursday. I'm going to give Saturday, also the 2 big games, Sunday and Monday night as well. So a lot to get into, but I want to thank everybody for the support and follow the radio show. If you haven't heard, every Monday through Friday, 12 to 2. It's an hour of pro football, an hour of college football, Sirius Channel 204. You can listen in, me and George Kurtz for the first hour. That's NFL talk. The second hour, me and Mike Carver, college football full circle. That's Monday through Friday. We break down all the top 25 battles. We talk about our best picks. We talk about everything, line movement. So if you really want to get your fix for college football Monday through Friday, you get an hour every week on Sirius Channel 204. So check that out. And then obviously Saturday morning, right? 9 to 12. We have a 3-hour pregame kickoff. 9 to 12. We talk about all the line movements. College football today with myself, Scott Wetzel. We also continue after college football today for 2 hours of in-game coverage on Sirius Channel 204 along with Sports Grid on the video side. So check out your local cable providers. Check out your local stations in your area. We're expanding each and every week. So check that out. Sports Grid doing phenomenal things out here in the East Coast along with across the nation. So check it out. But let's get right into the picks for this coming weekend. I do have one pick on Thursday. That is the NC State South Florida game. NC State did open up, at least in most books, 18.5. Some places 18 flat. They bet it up to about 18.5, 19. Settled in right now on Monday night. Right now on the FanDuel Sportsbook at 18.5. But check it out. Everything I'm going to go through is based off of FanDuel here in New Jersey, but check out some other books as well across the board. There's shop around. There's a lot of live movement, especially Monday afternoon, but that's a critical matchup in terms of NC State. Dynamic team last year. Remember, Devin Leary started the season, got injured, gave way to Bailey Hockman. Bailey Hockman has since transferred out to Middle Tennessee State. So Devin Leary back. They have 2 solid running backs in Person and Bam Knight. 2 of the top running backs potentially in the ACC. They're bruisers, a thunder and lightning type of duo. Team was 8-4 last year in terms of NC State. Played some close games down to the wire. Lost to Miami by 3. They had that lead by 10 points in the first half. Couldn't hold on. And then also knocked off Liberty by 1 point, 15-14. Last second field goal attempt in that matchup. So this was a team that Vegas and everyone were high on. They did have 17 starters last year. Those 8 games, though, came against opponents with a combined overall winning percentage of only 414%. So they beat up on lesser competition, sort of struggle with the better teams on their schedule last year. On the flip side, you have South Florida and Jeff Scott. Just from a record perspective, 1-8 overall, terrible performance. But you have to understand, Jeff Scott, former offensive coordinator with the Clemson Tigers, trying to understand the type of talent that fits his type of scheme. He wants to open it up. He wants to have a balanced type of offense. That's what he had there in terms of his days in Death Valley with Dabo Swinney, and that's what he's looking to achieve right here, especially in 2021. But when you look at the performance by South Florida last year, they started slow, lost to Cincinnati in a very close game, 28-7, when you think about Cincinnati's dominance last year, and they played that well down the stretch. Against the better teams in the AAC, they lost to a point by Temple, 34-33. They challenged Memphis, lost a very close ball game, challenged UCF at the end of the year. So this team consistently got better and bought into the offense and defensive philosophy for Jeff Scott. And I actually think it carries through to this season. I think Jeff Scott is still a good head coach. I think he's a great offensive mind. They do have a good running back in Kelly Joyner. They just named Cade Fortin the starting quarterback, the transfer from North Carolina. So this is a team I think that has potential to be in some ball games this year. And when you look at this line for week one, I think it's a severe overreaction just based off of last year. So I'm going to go with South Florida here. Let's also keep in mind that when you look at NC State in their week two matchup, a potential look ahead with an SEC opponent in Miss State. Very short week, so even if North Carolina State does, let's say, jump out to an early lead, do they rest their starters or their players for that week two matchup on the road in Starkville? That's a potential as well, like South Florida, to cover this number, 18.5, Thursday night, September 2nd. I'm going to cover some games on Friday, not on the video. If you want the games on Friday, listen to the radio show, College Football Full Circle. Let's move on to Saturday. Marquee battles. It starts in Camp Randall for me. Wisconsin opened up as a 4.5-point favorite. It's up to 5.5 in FanDuel and some other books right now. This is the hot team in terms of the Big Ten West. I know Graham Mertz is there. That defense stepped up. They dominated some opponents last year, in particular on the road in Michigan, and dominating them in the Big House. They ran them right out of town. And on the flip side, you have a disappointing year for James Franklin that started week one with the Penn State Nittany Lions on the road in Bloomington. Michael Penix with the 2-point conversion. Was he in? Was he out? Can make the argument both ways, but in the end, Penn State did drop that matchup and really catapulted them or slid them for the second week of the season, right? They had that game then after Ohio State. They couldn't challenge. They played well in the second half, pushed Ohio State to the limit, and wound up losing by 13 points. Depending upon when you got Penn State in that matchup, you either won or lost or even pushed, depending upon the final outcome. Spread was around 13.5 in that ball game. So this is a team that could have folded last year. They lost 5 straight. They all of a sudden rebounded under James Franklin. They won 4 games at the end of the year. I know it wasn't against elite competition, but look at the flip side with Jim Harbaugh and the Michigan Wolverines. Same type of situation. Start fast with Joe Milton on the road against Minnesota as a 25.5-point favorite. They dropped to their arch rival. Michigan State folded the rest of the year, and Penn State did go on the road as a 4.5-point underdog and blow Jim Harbaugh out of the water by 10 points, dominated that ball game from start to finish in the interior. This game comes down to which team do you believe into more? Do you believe in Graham Mertz and the physicality of Wisconsin, especially playing at home in Camp Randall, or do you buy into the speed of Penn State? I'm buying into the speed of Penn State, the coaching of James Franklin. I still think he's a better coach than Paul Chryst. Paul Chryst, in my opinion, does not make halftime adjustments. Go back to critical games. Played well a couple of years ago against Ohio State in the Big Ten championship game. No halftime adjustments. Ohio State wins that game. Go back to 2016 when they were actually leading against Penn State and James Franklin. Come right out of the gate, second half, blow that lead. Penn State wins that Big Ten championship game in dominating fashion. So do not like the coaching X's and O's standpoint for Paul Chryst. He's good when he has superior talent and he can execute his game plan, but if you push him, not so sure he's a good in-game manager, and that's where I favor James Franklin and the Penn State Nittany Lions in this matchup. They have the experience at the quarterback position in Sean Clifford. Don't love Sean Clifford, but I still think he's a competent quarterback to lead this team. Have possibly one of the best big play wide receivers in Jahan Dotson. Have a big play defensive back in Joey Porter Jr. And let's keep in mind, everybody talks about the front seven of Alabama, Clemson, and rightfully so over the last 6, 7 to 8 years, right? But Penn State, all they do is reload on the defensive front. Go back to the days of Carl Nassib when he led FBS with 15.5 total sacks. Penn State is average around 43 total sacks per year. So they bring in talent, they coach that talent up, and I think it holds true on the road in Camp Randall this weekend. You want to give me 4.5, 5 points? What I feel is the better team on the road with the slightly better quarterback and the better head coach? I'll take my chances. Penn State outright over the Wisconsin Badgers this coming Saturday, 12 o'clock kick. Should be a fantastic start and game. Keep an eye out. That's one that I'm going to be covering on In Game Live this coming Saturday. Another matchup, it's 3:30. It's Alabama and Miami. I mean, what could you say? Alabama, all they do is reload, baby. Bryce Young takes over. Alabama has not lost a week one matchup since 2001. Go back to the days of Corey Pouse and Deshaun Foster back in the day. I mean, they just dominate the competition. They've won those 19 straight games by an average margin of victory of 25.6 points per game. They just reload each and every year. But go back to last year, 28.5-point favorites against Elijah Drinkwitz and the Missouri Tigers did not cover that ball game. 19 total points. They won it by, got the win, got the back door, though, if you played Missouri in that matchup. You lose your offensive coordinator, Steve Sarkisian, to the Texas Longhorns. You lose two big play wide receivers in Jalen Waddle and Devontae Smith, potentially two of the best in Alabama history, right? And I understand up until this point, Alabama's done a fantastic job of reloading, right? I understand that. But I always say when you have a new offensive coordinator, you're seeing the game through a different set of eyes. And what I mean by that is, even though Bill O'Brien's a good coach, has coached at the NFL and college level, he might be more or less aggressive than his predecessors. And I think that's the most amazing thing about Alabama. And I've been critical of Alabama. I say they're a team to beat, but outside of the players, it's been the coaching staff, how consistent Nick Saban has been in terms of just regurgitating offensive coordinators and maintaining that consistency. Because I said, they're like pitchers. They need to get into a rhythm. They have to understand how that talent responds in game situations. They then have to call a game plan around that talent. And more importantly, like I said, they might be either more or less aggressive than their predecessors. Sarkisian might want to pass on first and 10 from the 30. Bill O'Brien might want to run and vice versa. So what are you going to get, especially early on in this matchup? I think will be critical whether Alabama covers this matchup or not. Now, when you look at Alabama, how do you beat Alabama? You need a mobile quarterback. We've said that in recent years. Johnny Manziel was able to do it. Chad Kelly was able to do it, who had good mobility. Joe Burrow back in 2019 wasn't an elite RPO type of guy, but did have pocket presence to break, contain, and make some plays with his legs to challenge that Alabama defense. That's what De'Ara King is. And De'Ara King is a mobile quarterback. How healthy is he coming off the ACL? We'll know, but I'll take my chances in this matchup. The other factor is if you want to look at maybe a weakness of the Alabama defense, last year they allowed 3 opponents to pass for over 300 yards. It was Ole Miss in that matchup with Matt Corral. They didn't cover. Texas A&M in the blowout loss, Kellen Mond and that offense threw for over 300. Bama covered. And then at the end of the year with Kyle Trask put up 408 in the SEC championship game. That defense allowed a lot of yards through the air. Kyle Pitts had a big day. Bama won 52-46, but they did not cover that matchup. So that might be the recipe for Rhett Lashlee and this Miami offense. And on the flip side, you have a Miami offense last year that did pass for over 300 in 6 of the 11 games. And they were 5-1 in those matchups. The only loss came in the bowl loss to Oak State, where De'Ara King got hurt. Miami won those 5 games by an average margin of victory of 22.2 points per game. So I think that's the matchup. I think Alabama wins, but I do feel that Miami has enough in the tank to cover this number Saturday afternoon at 3:30. Let's move on to the big one. What can you say about this one, right? Clemson and Georgia. Whoever loses this game right now will be on the outside looking in. Now, do they lose close or do they lose in a blowout loss? When you look at the series perspective, Georgia has won 6 of the last 7 against the Clemson Tigers. You look at Clemson's last victory over Georgia came back in 2013 when Todd Gurley and Sammy Watkins were there. That was a dynamic victory, 38-35 in Death Valley, primetime game. Watkins stepped up, Todd Gurley stepped up. It was an amazing primetime matchup, but the Clemson Tigers did get a 3-point victory. On the flip side, if you're looking just statistics, since 2016, Clemson is 11-3 straight up against SEC opponents. Only 3 losses. 2 of them came to Bama. 1 came to LSU in the SEC national championship game a couple of years ago. So against Joe Burrow. So that's the matchup. I think this matchup is interesting in the sense of we have DJU, experienced quarterback. We have JT Daniels, another experienced quarterback. But JT Daniels, for me, hasn't stepped up when it mattered most. I understand he had a solid season last year. But now the bullseye's on Georgia's back. This is a game, make it or break it. People want to know if Georgia's for real and JT Daniels is going to step up. I don't know if I have enough confidence in JT Daniels in this matchup, coupled with the fact, Georgia lost some starters to that secondary, and that's going to be the matchup going up against the Clemson Tiger wide receivers, especially early on. That's what I look for in terms of the early season matchups, guys, or women, in terms of how I break these games down. Inexperience in terms of the secondary. When you have inexperience or players that haven't played a lot in the secondary, there's the tendency to be exposed in terms of reading coverage week one, right? Formations, they're a lot different in terms of practice than they are in game time situations. Also, Clemson does have Justin Ross coming back to that lineup. That's an area of explosiveness. This was an area of concern for the Clemson Tigers last year. The biggest thing when you look at Clemson last year compared to 2018 and 2019. Back in 2018 and 2019, Clemson averaged around 240 rushing yards per game. Last year, they dipped down about 85 yards less per game, down right in the area of 153 rushing yards. It could have been a twofold type of situation. The loss of Justin Ross, the lack of experience on the outside, defenses stacked the box against ETN and forced Trevor Lawrence to beat them over the top. Or it was the inexperience of the offensive line, the lack of continuity that put them into long third down situations that stressed their offense. So we're going to know early on who has the inside edge in this matchup. I got to lean to Clemson in this ballgame, because I'm not a believer in JT Daniels right now, and the losses in the secondary scare me for the Georgia Bulldogs going up against a veteran wide receiver core of the Clemson Tigers. I think it's a great game. In the end, I feel Clemson has a lot to prove. They got blown out in the semifinal playoff game by Justin Fields. That defense got abused, 6 touchdowns. I think they step up in a big way, look to make a statement. Clemson does win this ball game anywhere from 7 to 10 points, but I think it is a 4-quarter game most of the way. But in the end, the athleticism of DJU takes over. Another matchup I want to talk about is in Maryland. West Virginia on the road as a short favorite against Mike Locksley and the Maryland Terps. Maryland stepped up last year. There were some games where Maryland really came on. Go to that matchup where they trailed by 21 points to PJ Fleck and Tanner Morgan, found a way to gut that victory out, right? The kid missed an extra point, and that really allowed Maryland to pull out that victory. Also, what about that domination of Penn State in Happy Valley? So a hot and cold type of team. You have a very good explosive quarterback in Tua's brother. You have an offense that really wants to challenge defenses vertically this year. But that's the matchup and why I'm intrigued in this ball game, because I'm high on West Virginia this year. I thought Neil Brown did a fantastic job. They were 6-4 last year. And more importantly, when you just look at defense and defensive scheme by the West Virginia Mountaineers, statistically one of the best in terms of the Big 12. They allowed 20 points per game. That ranked first overall in the Big 12, right next to Oklahoma. And then on top of that, they only allowed 135 rushing yards per game. That ranked 4th best in the conference. And number 1 ranked statistical defense in terms of secondary, 159 passing yards per game. Now, I know that there's been transfers for the West Virginia Mountaineers. I understand that. That hurts their secondary entering this matchup from a player perspective. But I'm buying into the scheme of Neil Brown and the scheme of that defense. They force teams to methodically work down the field. They keep everything in front of them and force quarterbacks to be patient. That's the main thing in terms of when you look at this defense by Neil Brown and the West Virginia Mountaineers. That's the matchup. Maryland wants to run fast, explosive plays, and you have a patient defense that wants to put everything in front of them. I'm going to go with the better defense. I like Jared Dagey in terms of the quarterback for West Virginia. I know he struggled in the bowl win against Army. They pulled him for Austin Kendall. Doesn't matter to me. This is a physical offense in the line for West Virginia. They want to pound the rock. Letty Brown's a solid running back. They average 159 rushing yards per game. This is an intriguing matchup, but I do feel the better team is West Virginia. Their win total for the start of the year was 6.5. I'm over that total. I think they grind out a gutty win. They're only laying 2.5, 3 points, 3.5 at the most in some books in this matchup. like the West Virginia Mountaineers to cover this number Saturday afternoon. Another intriguing ball game. I've been going back and forth in terms of, breaking these games down is Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech does face Northern Illinois. Now, we talk about secondaries. Northern Illinois has a very inexperienced secondary entering this matchup. 2 freshmen and a sophomore. Actually, I think it's 2 freshmen, 2 sophomores in this matchup. Thomas Hammock, he did not coach well the last couple of years. Very undisciplined coach. This is a methodical offense in Northern Illinois. They want to work down the field, run the football, and really keep opposing offenses on the sidelines. On the flip side, you have an up-and-coming Georgia Tech team. I know 3-7 last year, but they have some complementary pieces in terms of this team overall. Quarterback Jeff Sims, 13 touchdowns, 13 interceptions. Gibbs, the big play freshman running back, stepped up. Malachi Carter, a big play wide receiver. This is an offense that has younger players and a nucleus here built by Jeff Collins. They're a physical group, got better in terms of the rushing attack as the season went on, played some teams very close in the ACC, NC State and Pitt in particular down the stretch, and they do have a veteran secondary led by Trey Swilling. So I think they're going to be in this ball game. Again, they're playing at home. They should be in this ball game. They're laying 17.5, 18 points. I think they dominate this ball game from start to finish. The heat in Atlanta, I think, could be a factor in this matchup. I think Jeff Collins has a significant coaching advantage over Thomas Hammock in this matchup. You have an ACC team playing a MAC opponent. This line opened up at 17.5. It ballooned up to 18.5. I think it's way too much physicality on the offense and defensive lines. I like Georgia Tech to run away with this ball game at home. They turn to 1-0, and that's another team in terms of their win total this year that I'm going over for the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets in 2021. 2 big games this weekend on Sunday and Monday night. Comes down to the same type of situation in terms of the secondary for Florida State. An inexperienced secondary. 2 redshirt freshmen in that secondary going up against Jack Cohn, an experienced quarterback. I don't love Jack Cohn, but he is an experienced quarterback that should be able to read coverage. This is a Florida State defense last year that allowed 189 rushing yards to opposing offenses. They didn't buy into Mike Norvell's system then. I don't think they're buying into Mike Norvell's system now. Very undisciplined as well. 8.9 penalties per game last year. That shows me lack of discipline, young players not understanding the scheme. I don't think it changes in week number 1. You have a very physical offensive line in Notre Dame. They're going to want to still run the football with Kyron Williams. I think they can wear down a smaller defensive front in the Florida State Seminoles. That means those safeties and corners, if the run game does get going, they inch up. Big plays over the top for Jack Cohen, Michael Mayer, their tight end. Look for those wide receivers to step up as well. Short number, lined open up at 9.5. It's down to 7.5. Like Notre Dame to roll on Sunday night over the Florida State Seminoles. This, to me, should be a double-digit win for Notre Dame in this ballgame. Monday night, Lane Kiffin on the road, on a neutral field to face Louisville. You got SEC versus ACC. This is the one that all the experts, analysts, everybody loves Ole Miss. But can someone tell me who Ole Miss beat last year? They beat Vanderbilt. They beat South Carolina. They beat Indiana without Michael Penix. Show me the quality win for the Ole Miss Rebels. They also got blown out by 3-7 Arkansas when they threw 6 interceptions in that matchup. Have a win total of 7.5 as well. On the flip side, we have a Louisville team that did not live up to expectations, 4-7 overall last year. But Scott Satterfield's a very good coach. I know they lose Tutu Atwell. They lose some playmakers like Javion Hawkins to that offense, but you still have Malik Cunningham. You still have a team led by Monty Montgomery, the linebacker, and some solid athletic linebackers that I think can play with the Ole Miss offense. Not only that, but I think this game has last possession written all over it. As good as Matt Corral is, and he's being named for the Heisman, this is still an Ole Miss defense that allowed 519 total yards per game last year. You have an athletic quarterback in Malik Cunningham. He didn't step up last year. He was inconsistent. I think they dial it back. I think he's more into the scheme. I think they look to wear down Ole Miss's defense here, I think they can go toe-to-toe with them. Scott Satterfield will get it right, in my opinion. Another team I'm buying into over their 6.5 win total this year. Last person or last team with the ball wins, catching 9.5 in prime time. I like Louisville in this matchup. Don't be shocked if they win this ball game outright. If you want all the picks, they're all up on this video with the spreads on goforthechew.com. Goforthechew.com. You could see them weekly, completely transparent. And what I'm doing is, I was on the radio show this week. I'm carrying over. I had a terrible week, week 0. I'll be the first to admit it. Terrible week. I'm putting an 0-5 start because I picked every game last week in terms of totals as well from the radio show. I'm carrying that over to this video. This is the official week 1 video, but the record will show 0-5. So completely transparent. Let's see where we are at the end of the road. Have a great week, everyone. I hope you follow the radio and TV shows. I'll see you this Saturday.